The morning air in the small town of Willow Creek carried the faint scent of damp leaves and brewing coffee from the only diner on Main Street. Margaret Maggie Thompson, a 78-year-old widow with neatly pinned gray hair, walked slowly along the sidewalk, her cane tapping lightly against the pavement. Her coat, though faded, was spotless, and a small enameled daisy brooch, her late husband's gift, glinted on her lapel. Every morning at 7 a.m. sharp, she stopped by Marge's diner for a cup of black coffee and a slice of homemade pie. It was a ritual unchanged for over a decade. Maggie's steps were measured, each one a quiet defiance against the arthritis that stiffened her joints. She'd been a schoolteacher for 40 years, shaping generations in Willow Creek's one-room schoolhouse before it became a community center. Her husband, Daniel, had been a firefighter, a local hero who died saving a family from a blaze in '92. Maggie wore his memory like armor, carrying herself with a grace that belied her age. Marge's diner was a relic of better days, its neon sign flickering and its red vinyl booths worn but clean. As Maggie pushed open the door, the bell jingled, and Marge, a stout woman in her 60s, looked up from the counter with a smile. "Morning, Maggie. Apple pie today?" Maggie nodded, easing onto a stool. "Always, Marge. And don't skimp on the coffee." The diner was quiet, save for the hum of a radio and the clink of dishes in the back. Two truckers sat at a corner booth, and a young woman typed furiously on her laptop near the window. Maggie sipped her coffee, savoring its bitter warmth, when the door slammed open. Three young men, no older than 20, burst in, their laughter loud and careless. They wore hoodies and jeans, one with a backward cap and a vape pen dangling from his fingers. They sprawled across a booth, their voices drowning out the radio. Maggie glanced over, her lips tightening. She recognized the type, kids with too much energy and too little respect. The tallest, with a buzz cut and a silver chain, slammed his fist on the table, demanding service. "Yo, where's the waitress? We ain't got all day." Marge hurried over, her smile strained. "Be right with you, boys." Menus. The buzz-cut kid, whose name, Maggie overheard, was Jake, snatched a menu and tossed it to his friends. "Make it quick, lady. We're starving." His friends chuckled, egging him on. Maggie turned back to her pie, but her ears stayed sharp. She'd dealt with rowdy kids her whole teaching career. Most just needed a firm word to settle down. As Marge took their order, Jake's voice grew louder, now mocking the diner's decor. "This place is stuck in the '80s. Bet the food's as old as that grandma over there." He jerked his thumb toward Maggie, who froze mid-sip. The diner fell silent. Marge's face reddened, and the truckers exchanged glances but said nothing. Maggie set her cup down deliberately. She turned on her stool, facing the boys. Her voice, steady from years of commanding classrooms, cut through the tension. "Young man, if you're hungry, Marge will feed you. But there's no need to disrespect her or anyone else here." Jake's eyes narrowed, his smirk fading. "What's it to you, old lady? Mind your business." His friends snickered, but the air grew heavier. Maggie held his gaze, unflinching. "Common decency costs nothing. You might try it." The words hung there, sharp and clear. For a moment, Jake seemed taken aback, but his pride kicked in. He stood, sauntering toward Maggie's stool, towering over her. "You think you can lecture me? I don't take orders from fossils." His voice was low, threatening. The other diners watched, frozen. Marge clutched a dish rag, her knuckles white. Maggie didn't flinch. "I've taught boys like you for decades. You're not as tough as you think." Her calm only seemed to enrage Jake further. Without warning, he grabbed her cane from the counter and snapped it over his knee, the crack echoing like a gunshot. Maggie's hand tightened on her coffee cup, but she didn't move. The broken cane clattered to the floor. The diner was deathly quiet. Jake hesitated, as if shocked by his own actions, then backed away, muttering, "She asked for it." His friends looked uneasy, but no one spoke. Marge rushed to Maggie's side, whispering, "I'm calling the sheriff." Maggie shook her head slightly. "Not yet, Marge. Let's see what he does next." But Maggie's calm exterior hit a storm. That cane had been Daniel's, carved by his hands during their first year of marriage. Its loss cut deeper than the insult. She sat straighter, her eyes locked on Jake, who avoided her gaze. The truckers murmured, one pulling out his phone, but still, no one intervened. The young woman by the window had stopped typing, her face pale. Minutes passed, the tension thick. Then, the low rumble of an engine broke the silence. A black pickup truck pulled into the diner's lot, its tires crunching gravel. The door bore the emblem of the Willow Creek Fire Department. A man stepped out tall, broad-shouldered, with graying hair and a face etched with worry. It was Michael Thompson, Maggie's son, the town's fire chief. He'd been on his way to a training drill when Marge's text reached him. Michael strode into the diner, his eyes scanning the scene. They landed on his mother, then the broken cane on the floor. His jaw tightened. "Mom, you okay?" Maggie nodded, her voice steady. "I'm fine, Michael. Just a disagreement." But her trembling hand betrayed her. Michael turned to Jake, who shrank under his glare. "You broke her cane?" His voice was calm but carried the weight of authority. Jake stammered, "It was an accident, man." She was mouthing off. Michael stepped closer, his presence filling the room. "That's not what I see here." Maggie placed a hand on her son's arm. "Michael, let's not escalate this." But her eyes told a different story, one of hurt, not fear. The diner's patrons watched, some whispering, others filming discreetly. Jake's friend shifted uncomfortably, sensing the tide turning. Outside, another vehicle pulled up, a sheriff's cruiser, lights off but unmistakable. The morning chill had just grown colder. As the cruiser idled outside, the air inside Marge's diner grew thick with anticipation. Michael stood protectively near his mother, his eyes fixed on Jake. The broken pieces of the cane lay on the linoleum floor, a stark reminder of the line crossed. Maggie sat composed, her hands folded on the counter, but the faint tremor in her fingers betrayed the sting of the moment. The daisy brooch on her coat caught the morning light, a quiet symbol of her resilience. Jake's bravado had crumbled under Michael's glare. His friends, still seated in the booth, avoided eye contact, their earlier laughter replaced by nervous fidgeting. The truckers in the corner booth whispered to each other, and the young woman by the window had resumed typing, her fingers flying across her laptop, likely live-tweeting the drama. Marge, clutching a dish rag, hovered near Maggie, torn between fear and fury. The diner's door swung open, and Sheriff Laura Bennett stepped inside. In her early 40s, with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, Laura was a Willow Creek native who'd known Maggie since childhood. Her uniform was crisp, her badge gleaming, but her expression softened when she saw Maggie. "Maggie, you all right?" she asked, her voice steady but warm. "I've weathered worse, Laura," Maggie replied, managing a small smile. "Just a bit of a ruckus." Her voice was calm, but the broken cane told a different story. Laura's gaze flicked to the splintered wood, then to Jake, who shifted uncomfortably. "Mind telling me what happened?" Laura asked, addressing the room but looking directly at Jake. Her hand rested casually near her holster, a subtle reminder of her authority. Before Jake could respond, Michael stepped forward, his voice low but firm. "This could broke my mother's cane." Harassed her for asking him to show some respect. Jake's face flushed. "It wasn't like that. She was lecturing me, acting all high and mighty. I just lost it." His words faltered as Laura raised an eyebrow. His friends nodded weakly, but their support was half-hearted, their eyes darting to the exit. Maggie spoke up, her tone measured. "He's young, Laura. Angry. But I don't think he meant real harm." Her words surprised everyone, especially Jake, who looked at her, confused. Michael's jaw tightened, clearly unhappy with his mother's leniency. "He destroyed your cane, Mom. That was Dad's. You don't just lose it like that." Laura crouched to examine the broken cane, her fingers tracing the carved initials, DT, etched into the wood. "This is personal property damage, at minimum. Possibly assault, depending on witness statements." She glanced at the other diners. "Anyone see what went down?" The trucker in the plaid shirt spoke first. Kid was mouthing off, making a scene. Maggie just asked him to pipe down. He grabbed her cane and snapped it. "Didn't touch her, though." The young woman by the window nodded. "I recorded some of it. Want me to send it?" Laura gave her a curt nod, then turned to Marge, who recounted the same story, her voice shaking with guilt for not stepping in sooner. Jake's shoulders slumped, the reality of consequences sinking in. "Look, I didn't mean to break it. It just happened. I'll pay what, $20 for a new one." His attempt at a solution sounded hollow, and Maggie's eyes narrowed slightly, the first crack in her composure. "That cane," she said softly, "was carved by my husband. He spent weeks on it when we were newlyweds. It's not about the money." Her voice carried a weight that silenced the room. Jake swallowed, his defiance fading. For a moment, he looked like the kid he was, not the tough guy he'd been playing. Laura stood, her expression unreadable. Jake, you and your friends are coming to the station to give statements. We'll sort this out there. She gestured to the door, and Jake's friends rose reluctantly. But before they could move, Maggie raised a hand. Laura, a word? Maggie's tone was polite but firm. The sheriff hesitated, then nodded, stepping aside with Maggie near the counter. Their conversation was quiet, but Michael watched closely, his fist clenched. The diners strained to hear, but Maggie's voice was too low. After a moment, Laura's brows furrowed, and she shook her head, clearly disagreeing. Maggie persisted, her expression resolute. When they returned, Laura addressed Jake. Mrs. Thompson doesn't want to press charges. A murmur of surprise rippled through the diner. Michael's eyes widened. Mom, you can't be serious. Maggie cut him off with a look that had silenced classrooms for decades. I'm not done, Michael. She turned to Jake, her gaze steady. You broke something that mattered to me. But I've seen boys like you before, angry, lost, thinking the world owes you something. I won't let this define you, but you'll make it right. She paused, letting her words sink in. There's a community garden behind the old schoolhouse. It's overgrown, forgotten. You and your friends will spend your weekends there, fixing it up. You'll work with the kids I still tutor there. Learn what it means to build something, not break it. Jake blinked, caught off guard. His friends exchanged uneasy glances, but none dared argue. Laura crossed her arms. This is your one shot, Jake. 60 hours, minimum. Miss a single day, and I'll file charges faster than you can blink. Understood. Jake nodded slowly, his voice barely audible. Yeah, okay. He looked at Maggie, searching for words. I'm sorry. About the cane. Maggie studied him, her expression softening but not absolving. Show me you mean it. Words are cheap. Michael shook his head, frustration etched into his face, but he held his tongue. Laura escorted Jake and his friends to the cruiser, promising to follow up. As the door closed behind them, the diner exhaled collectively. Marge bustled to Maggie's side, offering a fresh coffee. You're too kind, Maggie. That boy didn't deserve it. Maggie sipped her coffee, her eyes distant. Kindness isn't about what they deserve. It's about what they might become. But her hand brushed the daisy brooch, and a flicker of pain crossed her face. The loss of the cane wasn't just wood, it was a piece of Daniel, a piece of her. And no amount of community service could replace that. The next morning, the late morning sun filtered through the dusty windows of Marge's diner, casting long shadows across the red vinyl booths. Maggie sat at the counter, her coffee cold, the absence of her can a quiet ache. The broken pieces had been swept away by Marge, but their memory lingered like a bruise. Michael paced near the door, his fire chief's jacket slung over a chair. The sheriff's cruiser had left with Jake and his friends, but the tension in the diner hadn't dissipated. Michael stopped pacing, his hands on his hips. Mom, I don't get it. That kid humiliated you, broke Dad's cane, and you're giving him a pass? Community service? He should be in a cell. His voice was tight, the frustration of a son who'd spent years protecting his mother's dignity. Maggie's eyes, sharp despite her age, met his. A cell won't teach him anything, Michael. It'll just make him angrier. I've seen it before, boys like Jake, carrying grudges they don't even understand. You don't fix a weed by cutting it down. You pull it out, roots and all. She touched the daisy brooch on her coat, a habit when she thought of Daniel. Michael sighed, running a hand through his graying hair. Dad would have handled this differently. He'd have had that kid shaking in his boots. Maggie's lips curved faintly. Your father was a fighter, not a punisher. He saved people, even the ones who didn't deserve it. I'm doing the same. The diner's patrons had mostly returned to their meals, though whispers about the incident buzzed like static. The young woman by the window, whose name Maggie now recalled was Emily, approached hesitantly. Mrs. Thompson, I posted the video online. It's going viral. People are calling you a hero. She held up her phone, showing a grainy clip of Maggie facing Jake, unflinching. Maggie frowned. Hero? I just spoke my mind. Put that away, Emily. The world doesn't need more noise. Emily nodded, slipping the phone into her pocket, but her eyes shone with admiration. Marge, wiping down the counter, chimed in. She's right, Maggie. You stood up to that punk. Folks around here won't forget it. But Maggie wasn't listening. Her thoughts drifted to the community garden, a tangled patch of earth behind the old schoolhouse where she still tutored kids after school. It had been Daniel's idea years ago, a place for the town's youth to learn patience, to grow something with their hands. After his death, it had fallen into neglect, much like Maggie's hope for its revival. Jake's punishment, she decided, would be its resurrection. Outside, Willow Creek was waking up. Shopkeepers swept their stoops, and a school bus rumbled past. Michael helped Maggie to her feet, his arm steadying her without the cane. "I'm driving you home," he said, not a question. Maggie didn't argue, though her pride bristled. As they stepped into the crisp air, a familiar figure approached. Clara Evans, a retired librarian and Maggie's oldest friend, her silver braids swinging as she hurried over. "Maggie Thompson, I heard what happened." Clara's voice was a mix of worry and indignation. "That boy ought to be ashamed. And you letting him off? You're too soft." Maggie chuckled, the sound weary but warm. "Soft's not the word, Clara. Stubborn, maybe. Come with me to the garden tomorrow. I'll need help keeping those boys in line." Clara's eyes softened. "Daniel's garden? You're really bringing it back." Maggie nodded, her gaze distant. "It's time. For the kids, for the town. Maybe even for Jake." Clara squeezed her arm, promising to spread the word. At the community center the next morning, Maggie arrived early, a borrowed cane from Clara feeling foreign in her hand. The garden was a mess, overgrown with weeds, its raised bed splintered, the soil hard as stone. A group of kids, her tutoring students, gathered nearby, curious about the new project. Jake and his friends arrived under Sheriff Laura's watchful eye, their faces a mix of resentment and embarrassment. Jake avoided Maggie's gaze, his hands stuffed in his hoodie. "This is stupid," he muttered to his friend, a lanky kid named Tyler. "Digging dirt for an old lady? What's the point?" Maggie overheard but said nothing, instead handing out shovels. "Start with the weeds," she instructed, her voice firm but not unkind. "Clear the ground, and we'll see what's worth saving." The boys worked grudgingly, their movements sluggish. Maggie sat on a folding chair, guiding the younger kids and planting seeds nearby. Clara bustled about, offering water and sharp-witted commentary. "You boys ever grow anything?" she asked Jake pointedly. He shrugged, wiping sweat from his brow. "Nah, waste of time." Maggie watched him, noting the way his hands hesitated over the soil, as if unsure how to touch it. She remembered boys like him from her teaching days, defiant on the surface, but often hiding shame or fear. "Jake," she called, "come here." He trudged over, expecting a lecture. Instead, she handed him a packet of sunflower seeds. "Plant these. Deep, but not too deep. They'll grow taller than you if you do it right." He stared at the seeds, then at her, searching for mockery. Finding none, he knelt and began digging. For the first time that morning, he worked without complaint. Maggie exchanged a glance with Clara, who raised an eyebrow but said nothing. The garden was quiet, save for the scrape of shovels and the kids' chatter. But Maggie felt it, a spark of possibility, fragile as a seedling pushing through cracked earth. Back at the diner, Marge had hung a small sign by the counter. "Support Maggie's garden project." Donations trickled in, seeds, tools, even a new cane from a local carpenter. Emily's video had spread beyond Willow Creek, drawing messages of support from strangers. Maggie ignored the attention, but Michael couldn't. "This could be big, Mom," he said over dinner that night. "The town's rallying behind you." Maggie shook her head. "I don't need a rally. I need that boy to learn something." Michael leaned back, studying her. "And if he doesn't?" Maggie's eyes flickered with resolve. "Then I'll keep trying. Some roots take longer to grow." As the garden began to take shape, it buzzed with activity under the mid-morning sun. Maggie sat on a wooden bench, her borrowed cane propped beside her, watching a dozen volunteers transform the once-forgotten plot. Children from her tutoring group laughed as they watered seedlings, while Clara directed traffic with the efficiency of a drill sergeant. The air smelled of turned earth and hope, but Maggie's eyes were fixed on Jake and his friends, who worked in a corner, their shovels moving with reluctant effort. 2 weeks had passed since the incident at Marge's diner, and Jake's 60-hour commitment to the garden was underway. His buzzcut was damp with sweat, his hoodie discarded on a fence post. He and his friends, Tyler and a quiet kid named Ethan, had cleared a large patch of weeds, though their grumbling hadn't stopped. "This is pointless," Tyler muttered, tossing a clod of dirt. "We're just her slaves now." Maggie overheard but didn't react. She'd learned long ago that words were often a shield for deeper feelings. Instead, she called out, "Jake, check those sunflowers. They need more water." Jake sighed, grabbing a watering can, but he did as asked. His movements were less defiant today, Maggie noted, though his scowl remained. The garden had become a town project. Marge donated coffee and pies for volunteers, and the hardware store sent bags of mulch. Emily, the young woman from the diner, had created a social media page for Maggie's Garden, posting photos of the progress. The viral video of Maggie's stand against Jake had drawn attention, and strangers sent seeds and handwritten notes. Maggie found the fuss excessive but allowed it, knowing it kept the kids engaged. Clara approached, wiping her hands on her apron. "That boy's trouble, Maggie. He's doing the work, but his heart's not in it. You sure about this?" Maggie's gaze softened. "He's here, isn't he? That's a start." Daniel always said you don't judge a man by his worst day. But not everyone shared Maggie's patience. Michael, who'd stopped by to check on the project, stood with arms crossed, watching Jake like a hawk. "He's skating by, Mom. You're giving him an out he doesn't deserve." Maggie shook her head. "He's not skating. He's learning. Give it time." Michael's jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. He'd inherited his father's protective streak, but Maggie's stubbornness was a force of its own. As the morning wore on, a new figure arrived, a wiry man in his 50s, wearing a worn denim jacket. It was Tom Harper, the schoolhouse's caretaker and a former student of Maggie's. His face lit up when he saw her. "Mrs. Thompson, you've got this place looking alive again." Daniel would be proud. He carried a box of tools, donated by the fire station. Maggie smiled, but her eyes caught Jake watching the exchange. "Tom, tell Jake about the garden's history," she said, beckoning Jake over. Jake trudged up, wary. Tom, unfazed, launched into his story. This was Mr. Thompson's idea, Daniel, the firefighter. He wanted a place for kids to learn responsibility. "I was a punk back then, always in trouble. Mrs. Thompson made me plant carrots here. Changed my life." Jake shifted, uncomfortable. "Yeah, well, I'm just here 'cause I have to be." Tom laughed. "So was I. But those carrots? They grew. And I turned out okay." He clapped Jake's shoulder and walked off to help the kids. Jake stared at the ground, the watering can still in his hand. Later, as the volunteers broke for lunch, Maggie noticed Jake lingering by the sunflower patch. He knelt, inspecting the tiny sprouts he'd planted. One of the tutoring kids, a girl named Sophie, ran up. "Are those yours?" she asked, wide-eyed. Jake hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, they're kinda cool." Sophie beamed. "Mrs. Thompson says sunflowers follow the sun. Like they're brave." Jake glanced at Maggie, who was helping Clara sort seeds. For the first time, he didn't look away. But the moment was cut short by a shout from Tyler. "Jake, come on. We're done for today." Jake stood, brushing dirt from his jeans, and rejoined his friends. Maggie watched, sensing a crack in his armor. That afternoon, trouble brewed. Emily rushed to Maggie, her phone in hand. "Mrs. Thompson, look at this." A new post on the garden's page showed a blurry photo of Jake flipping off the camera, captioned, "Forced labor for an old hack." The comments were vicious, some defending Maggie, others mocking her mercy. Maggie's face remained calm, but her grip on the cane tightened. Michael, overhearing, stormed over. "That's it, Mom. He's done. I'm calling Laura." Maggie raised a hand. "Not yet. Let me handle this." Her voice was steel. She'd faced defiant students before, but this felt personal, a test of her belief in second chances. As the day ended, Maggie stayed late, planting a row of marigolds with Sophie. Jake and his friends had left, but his sunflowers stood tall, their sprouts fragile but stubborn. Maggie touched her daisy brooch, thinking of Daniel. "Some seeds take longer," she murmured. But the online post gnawed at her. Jake's defiance wasn't just a weed, it was a root she hadn't yet reached. The following week, the garden glowed under the late afternoon sun, its rows of freshly planted seeds a testament to Willow Creek's renewed spirit. Maggie sat on her bench, a new cane, carved by the town's carpenter and engraved with a simple MT resting beside her. The marigold she'd planted with Sophie bloomed vibrantly, but Maggie's thoughts were on the storm brewing online. The photo of Jake's crude gesture, captioned with venom, had spread like wildfire, turning the garden's story into a battleground of opinions. Clara stormed over with her phone. "Maggie, this is outrageous. That boy's mocking you to the whole world. I told you he was no good." She thrust the screen forward, showing hundreds of comments, some praising Maggie's grace, others calling her naive. A few demanded Jake's arrest. Maggie scanned the post, her expression unreadable, then handed the phone back. Words on a screen don't change the work we're doing here. But the words stung. Maggie had faced defiance before, but this felt like a betrayal of the fragile trust she'd begun to build with Jake. At the garden, he'd shown glimmers of change, watering his sunflowers with care, even smiling when Sophie praised them. Yet the post suggested a deeper resentment, one Maggie hadn't reached. She touched her daisy brooch, drawing strength from Daniel's memory. "He's testing me," she said softly. "I won't give up yet." Michael wasn't so forgiving. He arrived at the garden, his fire chief's truck kicking up dust. "Mom, I saw the post. This kid's laughing at you. At all of us." His voice shook with barely contained anger. "Laura's ready to pull him in. Say the word." Maggie shook her head, her eyes on the sunflower patch. "He's not laughing, Michael. He's scared. Scared of changing, of facing himself." Jake and his friends arrived for their scheduled hours, under Sheriff Laura's stern supervision. The other volunteers, Tom Harper, Clara, and a handful of parents, gave them cold stares. Jake's face was a mask, his eyes avoiding Maggie's. Tyler, emboldened by the online attention, muttered loudly, "This place is a joke. We're just props for her little show." Ethan, the quiet one, stayed silent, his shovel moving mechanically. Maggie called Jake over, her voice steady. "We need to talk." He trudged up, expecting a reprimand. Instead, she gestured to the sunflowers. "They're growing strong. You did that." Jake shrugged, his jaw tight. "So what? Doesn't change anything." Maggie studied him. "I saw the post, Jake. I know you're angry, but I also know you're better than that." Jake's eyes flashed. "You don't know me. You think you're some saint, fixing me with your garden? I'm here 'cause I have to be." His voice cracked, betraying a flicker of shame. Maggie didn't flinch. "You're right. I don't know you, but I know what it's like to lose something and lash out. That cane you broke? It was my husband's. It hurt to lose it, but I'm not punishing you for it. I'm asking you to build something instead." The words hung between them. Jake looked away, his hands clenched. For a moment, it seemed he might walk off. But Sophie ran up, holding a drawing of a sunflower with Jake's name scrawled beneath it. "I made this for you," she chirped. Jake froze, then took the paper, his expression softening. "Thanks, kid," he mumbled, folding it carefully into his pocket. The garden work continued, but the online post had consequences. Emily approached Maggie, apologetic. "I tried to take the photo down, but it's been shared too many times. The news picked it up. Channel 5 wants to interview you." Maggie sighed. "No interviews. This isn't about me." But the attention was inescapable. By evening, a small crowd had gathered outside the garden, some holding signs, "Justice for Maggie," and "Respect our elders." Michael pulled Maggie aside. "This is getting out of hand, Mom. The town's divided. Half see you as a hero, half think you're letting a punk walk free. Let me handle it." Maggie's voice was firm. "No, Michael. This is my fight. Not with Jake, but for him." She looked at Jake, now helping Sophie plan a new row. His movements were deliberate, almost gentle. That night, Maggie sat at her kitchen table, a cup of tea untouched. The carpenter's cane leaned against the wall, a kind gesture but no replacement for Daniel's. She opened a letter from a stranger, one of many. "Mrs. Thompson, your mercy inspires us. Don't let that boy dim your light." Maggie set it aside, her thoughts on Jake's folded drawing. She'd seen something in him today, a spark of pride, buried under layers of anger. But trouble loomed. Laura called, her voice grim. "Maggie, Jake's father showed up at the station. He's furious about the garden, says you're humiliating his son. He's threatening to sue." Maggie's heart sank. The roots of Jake's defiance ran deeper than she'd thought, and now they were tangled with a new challenge. Undeterred, Maggie met the challenge head-on, as the garden continued to bloom with new life as summer faded into autumn. Sunflowers towered over neat rows of marigolds and vegetables, their vibrant colors a stark contrast to the overgrown mess of months past. Maggie stood at the garden's edge, her new cane, carved by the town's carpenter and engraved with a simple MT steady in her hand, the engraved MT catching the sunlight. The daisy brooch on her coat gleamed, a quiet tribute to Daniel. Today was no ordinary workday, it was the garden's grand reopening, a celebration of second chances. Weeks had passed since the online post and the threat of a lawsuit from Jake's father, a gruff man named Robert who'd stormed into Sheriff Laura's office, claiming Maggie was shaming his son. Maggie had met him calmly, inviting him to see the garden. "Your boy's building something here," she'd said. "Come judge for yourself." Robert had scoffed but showed up, watching Jake work alongside Sophie and the other kids. Something shifted in him that day, and the lawsuit talk faded. Jake had changed too. His 60 hours were long complete, but he still came to the garden, tending his sunflowers with a care that surprised even Clara. The post he'd made, once a symbol of defiance, had been replaced by a new one, his own, showing the garden's progress with a caption, "Learning what matters." Emily's social media page now overflowed with photos of volunteers, kids, and Jake, his scowl replaced by a tentative smile. The reopening ceremony drew a crowd. Red, white, and blue bunting draped the schoolhouse, and tables groaned with Marge's pies and lemonade. Michael, in his fire chief's dress uniform, stood beside Maggie, pride softening his usual sternness. "You did it, Mom," he said, gesturing to the garden. Maggie shook her head. "We did it. All of us." Her eyes found Jake, who was helping Sophie hang a banner that read, "Maggie's Garden, where roots grow." Tom Harper, the caretaker, took the makeshift stage, his voice carrying over the chatter. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're here to honor Maggie Thompson, who reminded us what community means. This garden was her late husband Daniel's dream, and she's brought it back to life." The crowd applauded, and Maggie waved off the praise, uncomfortable with the spotlight. Sheriff Laura stepped up next, her badge shining. Maggie could have pressed charges that day at the diner. Instead, she chose to teach. And Jake, she nodded to him. "You proved her right." Jake's face reddened, but he stood taller. The crowd's applause grew louder, and Sophie tugged his sleeve, beaming. Maggie was persuaded to speak. She climbed the stage slowly, her cane tapping, and faced the sea of faces, volunteers, neighbors, even strangers inspired by the viral story. "I'm no hero," she began, her voice clear. "I'm a teacher, and teaching means believing in what someone can become, not what they've done." She paused, finding Jake in the crowd. "Jake made a mistake, but he's planted more than seeds here. He's planted trust." Jake climbed the stage at her gesture, holding a small wooden box. His voice shook as he spoke. "Mrs. Thompson, I was wrong that day. I broke your cane, disrespected you. You didn't give up on me." He opened the box, revealing a new cane, carved by him and Tom, with a daisy etched into the handle. "I made this. It's not as good as your husband's, but I tried." Maggie's eyes glistened as she accepted it, her fingers tracing the daisy. "It's perfect, Jake." "Thank you." The crowd erupted, and Michael wiped his eyes, his earlier doubts forgotten. Jake's father, Robert, stood in the back, clapping slowly, his expression softened. After the ceremony, Marge unveiled a plaque at the garden's entrance, "Maggie's Garden, a place of growth and grace." It featured a photo of Maggie and Daniel, young and smiling, planting the first seeds years ago. As the crowd mingled, Jake approached Maggie alone. "I'm joining the Fire Academy," he said quietly. "Like your husband. I want to help people." Maggie smiled, her heart full. "You already are." She glanced at the sunflowers, now swaying in the breeze. "Keep growing, Jake." As she walked away, leaning on her new cane, the garden buzzed with laughter and life. Willow Creek had changed, slower to judge, quicker to listen. And Maggie, ever the teacher, knew some lessons took root deeper than others. That evening, Maggie sat on her porch, the new cane across her lap. A letter from Emily lay open, detailing funds raised to expand the garden. But Maggie's thoughts were on Daniel, on Jake, on the kids who'd plant there long after she was gone. The daisy brooch caught the fading light, and she whispered, "We did good, love." The stars above Willow Creek shone brighter, as if in agreement.